Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. Or for some of you who just are joining us for the first time, welcome to the Henry George School, to our webinar, Full Access or Full Employment, the Macroeconomics of UBI. Our speaker tonight is Derek Van Gorder, an independent scholar and co-founder of the Gresham Institute, a nonprofit organization devoted to promoting serious discussions on the economics of UBI, Universal Basic Income. Derek is currently writing a series of essays on the mechanics of UBI policy. Recorded discussions and debates with him related to economics can be found on his YouTube channel. Over to you, Derek.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Universal Basic Income, also known as Basic Income or UBI, is an unconditional cash payout delivered to all on a regular basis without means test or work requirement. In popular discourse around UBI, the policy is often framed as either a supplement or alternative to the traditional social safety net or welfare programs. Arguments for or against UBI typically proceed from this basis. In this talk, I'm going to present a different perspective by exploring basic income's potential as an alternative form of normal macroeconomic policy, a different way of managing the money supply, aggregate spending, and overall financial conditions. In this framing, the intended beneficiary of UBI is everyone and the average person. In other words, we're drawing our attention to someone economists often do, the average consumer. When we compare UBI to central bank expansionary monetary policy, which is its true closest analog in our monetary system, we can discover an argument in favor of unconditional income on the basis of pure economic efficiency. In theory, as the rate of basic income increases to maintain price stability, a monetary authority may have to roll back monetary expansion to make room for the new spending. This means one source of the money supply is being replaced with another. So the question we need to answer is, when you make only those two changes, what happens to the economy? It turns out the result is a revised aggregate financial condition that is, I think, virtually synonymous with improved consumer welfare and a more efficient labor market. By implication, a basic income can be viewed as a necessary but missing fiscal complement to conventional monetary policy. In the absence of this key policy lever and not realizing we've needed it, we may have been looking at the monetary system the wrong way around. In an economics context, we can model basic income as simply a direct consumer income source. It's like a wage, except you don't have to work for it. It's like a welfare payment, except nobody has to decide you deserve it. Because it's just an income, its only result is purchasing power, whereas other kinds of income use purchasing power to achieve other ends. Conditional incomes are only effective because income actually does grant you access to a market economy's goods and services. If money couldn't be exchanged for goods, nobody in a market would use it to set or pay prices. This market access function of money is at the core of what UBI is about. Universal income is just a simple and reliable mechanism for delivering money to people. Money itself does the rest. It allows its recipient to buy whatever the market can produce. Income grants access. A universal income grants access at scale. Wages are useful to create labor incentives, but it turns out not all income needs to work that way, and it's not helpful to try to make all income work that way. In our society, we tend to think it's normal for the average person to get their income from a job and a wage. We also tend to assume that in a market economy, there should be a paying job available for as many people as possible. The problem with this assumption is that jobs are how the economy uses up a particular natural resource, our labor. Wages are a financial compensation that motivates people to give up some of their valuable time to markets. And labor is just one of many inputs that go into the private sector along with other natural and industrial resources. The outputs of this system are the finished goods and services we demand. In other words, the only reason it's useful to put labor into the economy at all is so that people get something out of it. In theory, then, an ideal economy, you would think, would be one that makes and distributes the most possible goods while putting people to work only to the extent it's actually necessary to do so. In this view, labor is a means, useful, but not an objective in itself. If we're going to add money into this model, we should expect the same kind of outcome from the economy's flows of spending. Wages are how firms buy labor. Consumer spending is how people buy goods. What position does maximum efficiency require of these spending flows? Intuitively, the most consumer spending possible for the least wage spending. This sounds paradoxical in our world. In our world, wages are how consumers get incomes to spend. We assume that wage growth is income growth. How could it be otherwise? Well, one way it could be otherwise is if we had a labor-independent source of income for people, a basic income. When you add this new flow of consumer spending separate to wages, suddenly consumer spending can move more independently from labor use. Here's another way to look at it. Imagine a world where total wages did equal total spending. In this world, the average consumer gets the same value out of the economy that they put into it. That's not the best possible economy you could live in. Now, what would have to occur in order for this state of affairs to change? The answer is any instance of a labor market efficiency development. Now, the labor market can, because of technological change or other change, produce more goods while using the same level and distribution of labor. This can imply the same level and distribution of wages. But there's a problem. Market firms are profit-driven, so they're only going to produce what people can buy. If spending is limited to wages because that's where consumers get income, and we didn't need more wages to get more productive, instead of spending and output rising together from their actual level to their potential level, the market will just produce less instead. The economy will not produce what people lack the income to buy. How would you go about solving this problem? How should we choose to fill a gap between efficient wages and the economy's full output spending? Well, you could just give the average person more money, or you could add more jobs and wages to a market economy that didn't really need them. Remember how today people think having a job is normal. This is the path our society has currently chosen. The average job in our economy is not as efficient as it could be, but inefficient jobs still pay out money. This is how we close the gap between wages and spending today. We've been using inefficient firms and inefficient jobs as a kind of excuse to give people money. They need this money to buy what more efficient firms are actually producing. The money is useful, but the jobs are less useful. You might think I'm talking about government jobs, moving resources away from the market sector as they tend to do. And those are a factor in the problem. But if you have a central bank standing willing and ready, and your stated goal as a society is to create as many market jobs as possible, then you don't need a government to create useless jobs. The market can do it for you. This is what conventional macroeconomic policy, in the absence of UBI, is currently forced to do. We just don't quite realize we're doing it. We think that by reducing interest rates and making debt as cheap and available as possible, we are just giving the market economy a kind of necessary financial encouragement to employ the workers it needs. In reality, we're floating the average firm on easier credit to try to give the average person money through jobs, money that should be arriving to people from somewhere else instead. This money needs to get to people from somewhere other than the labor market because the labor market doesn't actually need as many people as workers anymore. Our system, our monetary system, has been inadvertently designed to hold income and wages together when they should be moving apart. In the absence of a simple and reliable consumer income source to reflect our true productivity, the inevitable result is an efficiency gap develops, a difference between our economy's current and potential performance. Firms end up producing for the spending we have rather than for the maximum possible spending, and attempting to close the gap with wages doesn't fully solve the problem. It just makes the shape of the gap more complicated. You're filling up some parts, but you're not reaching the rest. and the entire pie is smaller than it could be because resources are being used less efficiently. They're trapped by less efficient finance and in less efficient firms. Using policy to hold on to jobs holds the market back from better productivity. This is the problem that a basic income solves. UBI is a source of consumer income unassociated with wages or any other market cost. Implementing this income serves to enable greater market production and access than is possible without it. This is a crucial piece of monetary infrastructure. If you remove it, then we become forced to distribute money through overemployment. When you add it in, people benefit and the economy gets leaner and more productive too. That's what can happen when you fix a hole in your monetary system. Anytime there is an aggregate level labor market efficiency development, that suggests less of total income and spending needs to be reserved as a labor incentive. More of total income can now just be for access. Anytime it's possible to shift the balance from wages to basic income in this way, and we still get more production as a result, that's what we should do. It doesn't make sense to keep people overemployed yet underserved. Of course, at the same time, we can't shrink wages too much because then there'd be insufficient labor incentives such that production would fall. That would be the problem of underemployment. It's impossible for all of the economy's income to be UBI. So the question is, how much UBI is the right amount? What is the necessary level of UBI spending to achieve full production and prevent overemployment? Is it $0? Why is $0 specifically the right level of UBI? Are we sure it's not some higher number? How can we make sure? Deciding the right UBI payout does not mean coming up with a nice round number that we believe will eliminate poverty. It doesn't require a debate about trading away other programs for UBI. And it doesn't involve hunting around for new taxes either. None of these are how we're funding the market now, so why would we do something different for UBI? We should think in terms of setting the position of a key macroeconomic policy lever. Using our current system as an analogy, when central bankers attempt to determine interest rates, they're not looking at where society has chosen to draw the poverty line, and they're not scraping together tax revenue either. They make continuous adjustments, trying to discover the ideal position of a key variable that is going to affect the market and the system as a whole. That's how we should be looking at basic income. What is the optimal rate of basic income for the economy we have? Finding this out requires a calibrated basic income. With this policy, we can introduce basic income at any arbitrarily low amount, and then gradually increase the rate of basic income until the maximum sustainable UBI is achieved. This implies discovering a rate of basic income consistent with people's full financial access to all the goods and services the market economy can actually produce for them. Only at this rate of basic income can we say the efficiency gap in our economy has been fully closed. We can call this the calibration point or the natural rate of basic income. Natural here just means it's the right amount given the productive state of the economy and our macroeconomic objectives. After basic income arrives at this rate, for a time, there's no more benefit to be had by increasing basic income further because the market has achieved its maximum distributional potential. If we wanted more basic income going forward, we'd either have to wait for an endogenous efficiency development or change other policy and see what happens. If we change other policy in a way that utilizes resources more efficiently, we might find we can get even more UBI. It turns out one such policy change is already set up to do just that automatically. Higher basic income requires the central bank to tighten monetary policy to maintain price stability. To make room for more UBI spending, a central bank will have to undo existing monetary expansion to keep the overall supply of credit and money in balance. If you want to know where the money for UBI comes from, that's the answer. We put monetary expansion on pause and do UBI instead. You're just switching one part of the money supply for another. Our system is set up well to make this transition. We already have monetary policy, we just need UBI. From there on out, the question for the relevant policymakers is, to what extent should the economy be fueled by lending and private debt? And to what extent is it better to use spending and money instead? These are the questions economists should be asking about basic income. Trading monetary expansion for higher basic income changes the composition of total spending. It means more consumer spending for less lending and borrowing. Private debt is useful. It allows prospective producers to run a business. But consumer spending is how the market knows which firms are productive or not. In an ideal economy, we can think of consumer spending as being in the driver's seat. We need to know when basic income spending increases that people are actually receiving more goods and services. Higher UBI has to trigger more production. That's what happens when you find a rate of basic income that is consistent with price stability. If we decrease lending through tighter monetary policy while total real consumer spending increases through UBI, this implies a higher quantity of goods has actually been produced for purchase, even from less total investment. That's what an efficient market economy looks like at the aggregate level, one that uses fewer natural and industrial resources, yet delivers more economic benefit at the same time. By using resources differently, we can get an aggregate level increase in distributional efficiency. In this changed financial situation, the average firm becomes more productive through their incentives. Now there's slightly, or maybe even a lot of money to be made producing a higher quantity of demanded goods and services for everyone. And at the same time, it's less easy to sustain operations on cheaper debt. This implies a market-based allocation of resources from less productive firms to more productive firms. In theory, monetary policy is a great tool for managing total lending and the size of the private financial sector, because that's what interest rate adjustments most directly affect. In a similar way, basic income is the most efficient tool imaginable for the purpose of managing total consumer spending. Any other policy has a longer way to go through the market. Its conditions can affect more incentives and prices. For monetary policy effects to reach consumer spending, they have to travel through interest rates, the financial sector, and the labor market. They have to go through every market loan and every market wage. The problem with using this channel to lift consumer spending is that it excessively links consumer spending and financial sector activity. This prevents finance and consumption from moving more independently, if and when needed, to reflect a more efficient state of production and investment. Without UBI, today we're forced to grow our consumer spending by growing speculative investment. Interest rates have to be artificially low, and monetary policy has to be artificially expansionary. What is a predictable result of too much cheap credit for too many firms? Credit bubbles are going to form. Private debt bubbles are funding our Main Street spending. Because they're debt bubbles, they inevitably collapse. Because they collapse, so does our spending. It seems like an intractable problem, but we don't need to get money to consumers this way through the private financial sector, not entirely. We can let over-leveraged firms get eliminated by the market more often. That way, bunches of them won't be clumping up together to get eliminated all at once in one big bust. Wages as incomes is the mechanism behind an unnecessarily unruly business cycle. Tighter monetary policy allowed by basic income starts to tame that cycle. An easier path to financial sector stability is another desirable byproduct of bringing your financial sector back in line with your consumer economy. We already fund everyone's income through expansionary monetary policy. Basic income is a simpler way to do what we're already doing. If we introduce a direct consumer income source into our existing framework for achieving price stability and financial sector stability, then we can let the economy's consumers show us how much production is possible and how much employment we actually need. The result is an improved state of financial access for everyone, certainly for the average person. Markets are markets. There's going to be winning and losing firms. But in this framework, over time, as productivity grows, all of us stand to enjoy not only more income, but an improved form of access that can only occur through unconditional income. Thanks very much for listening. My name is Derek Van Gorder. I'm a co-founder of the Gresham Institute, along with my colleagues Alex Howlett and Philip Jackson. We're interested in the economics of basic income. I'm looking forward to your questions. If I don't get to them all now, or you want to discuss more, or you think I'm missing something important, you can let me know. You can always email me at derek@gresham.org, and I'm happy to schedule more discussion over Zoom or Discord anytime.